this place, man. I forgot my mic stand today, so we're going to be doing like improv church. Like, so,
You're funny.
this guy walks into an auto parts store. Says the guy behind the counter, "I'd like to get an air freshener for my Yugo." The guy says, "Sounds like a fair trade to me."
Sorry.
I just saw that this morning. So yeah, there we go. Improv church. Well, thank you everybody for coming, for being here today. It's good to see people we haven't seen for a while and people we see all the time. And everybody's welcome here all the time. And I love that about what we do. So we were gone last week, and it's a good thing nobody came over to Jackson because it was just a rerun. I got called. George gave me a text. What was it, Thursday or Friday?
No, it was Saturday.
Saturday, okay. Said, "Hey, could you do the pulpit tomorrow as well?" I said, "Well, okay." So it was on short notice. It was a rerun of what we did last time, which was kind of fun, taking that to somebody else. So we are going to continue today our journey through the Gospel of John, and I think this is like part 4 of John chapter 9 today. We're just making our way through, and this is one of those days I'm just going to apologize for the message ahead of time a little bit. I wanted to go through this whole thing because it gets really dark and bleak, and we're just going to kind of end there today because I'm not going to have time to go through to where it gets better again. Where we're at, what was going on was that Jesus was arguing with the Pharisees for the longest time, or they were arguing with him. He was telling them the truth. And finally he drops that ultimate truth bomb. He says, "Before Abraham was, I am," which means that he's been eternally existent, pre-existent. He's been around. He's basically taking the name of deity upon himself, saying that he is God. And the guys are like, "Where's rocks? We're going to throw rocks at this guy and kill him with rocks." And so he slipped out, and they were arguing with him. He was telling them the truth, and this was all in the temple courts, like the foyer of the church, essentially, back in the day. And during this whole time, the religious people are arguing with Jesus, and no ministry really happens. We kind of noticed that nothing ministry-wise really happened. He didn't heal anybody. He was teaching for a little bit, and they came up and wanted to argue. So now he gets out of the church, and good things start to happen. And I think there's a lesson in there for us. There's a greater lesson that we can sit around the church and we can argue about things, or pat ourselves on the back and tell us how great we are and feel good. But until we step out of the church, that's where the good things now begin to happen. And Jesus steps out the church. First thing that happens is they're walking along, and they see this blind guy begging, and it says that the guy had been blind since birth. And so there was, Jesus sat down. He's like, "All right." Well, he made a little spit, made a little, little mud with the spit, spit in the dirt, and kind of did this and put it in the guy's eyes, and then sent him off to the pool of Siloam, which means sent. So he sent the guy to the pool called Sent, and told him to wash. And it probably made no sense to the guy. So it was, he made his way over to the pool. He washed. All of a sudden, he could see. Good news. That's a good day in this guy's life. His sight was restored. So that's a good thing. Now his life's going to get a little hard as we move on today. People questioned the man and the story he told. And when they asked, "Hey, is this not the guy that was born blind? I don't know. It looks like him." "I don't think it's really him. I think it's just a guy that looks like him. It can't be him." And he's like, "People, it's me." And they're like, "What happened?" He says, "Well, this Jesus guy, and he spit in the ground and made mud and put it in my eyes. I went and washed, and then I could see." He didn't need to embellish. He didn't need to understand everything that had happened. He didn't get overly done with his theology, with his churchiness, with his, his churchanese. He just told the story as it happened to him. And they're like, "Well, where is this Jesus guy?" He's like, "I don't know." And that's a good answer sometimes. We talk about how "I don't know" is a good answer. If you don't know, you don't have to make stuff up to sound smarter and more in the know than you are, to sound more wise than you are. Sometimes "I don't know" is the right answer. And, plus he's like, "Well, I couldn't pick him out in the lineup. I was blind when he talked to me. I never got to see him yet." And so, he just gives the facts, just tells the story. They ask where Jesus is, he says, "I don't know." So we're going to pick up now in John chapter 9, verse 13. They brought to the Pharisees the man who had been blind. Now the day on which Jesus had made the mud and opened the man's eyes was the Sabbath. Therefore the Pharisees also asked him how he had received his sight. He put mud in my eyes, the man replied, and I washed, and now I see. Just the facts. Just telling the story as it happened. Some of the Pharisees said, this man is not from God, for he does not keep the Sabbath. But others asked, how can a sinner perform such signs? So they were divided. So the first thing is that they brought to the Pharisees the man who was blind. And who's they? Well, they say, I don't know, who is they? And they here is, if you go back to verse 8, it says, his neighbors and those who had formerly seen him begging were asking, isn't this the man who used to sit and beg? So people didn't know what to do with this guy now. You know, sometimes when we're down, when we're sick, when we're sinful, when we're not what we could be or should be, people know what to do with us in that situation. And now Jesus came along, restored the guy, made him so that he could see, set him free from that, which is like an ultimate act of Sabbath and rest. And people don't know quite what to do with him now. It's like, I don't know, I've never seen this happen before. Let's take him to the Pharisees. So they brought him to the Pharisees. The Pharisees being the church and the court of the Jewish culture kind of rolled into one happy little entity, right? And part of their job was to settle disputes over religious controversy. Can you imagine having to go to court every time Jesus does something good in your life? Right? And here they are. They're like the judge, the jury, the religious leaders. It's like having all that balled into church. I think it's good that we keep those two kind of separated out. Because when you get into these theocracy things, these guys had gone totally off the rails in their rule keeping. They gotten so far away from what God actually wanted. Jesus came back to try and put them back on the rails, and they were fighting him. They were fighting him on this stuff. So yeah, every time God does something good in your life, oh man, God gave us a new job, and He did this and that, and I don't know about that. We're going to take you to church. We're going to take you before the elders and the deacons, and we're going to have them look at you and question you and put you under interrogation. Oh, good times. That's exactly what's going to happen here. And so the guy retells the story, just as it happened. I don't know, he made spit, made mud with the spit, put it in my eyes, I went and washed, and then I could see. That's just all that happened. Didn't totally understand it, but he just retells the story. And it points out that this happened on the Sabbath. I warned you guys that this was coming. The last time Jesus healed somebody on the Sabbath, he got in huge trouble with the Pharisees. Because it was the guy that was paralyzed, he was laying there on his mat, and Jesus is like, if you want to be well, take up your mat and walk. And so he gets up, takes his mat up, and walks, and the Pharisee's like, oh, it's the Sabbath, you cannot carry a burden. Who told you you could carry that mat? And so they got into this big argument. And so here it is, the Sabbath again. And Jesus is doing a thing on the Sabbath. And, Jesus, it becomes obvious to me here that we have a pattern, that he's literally choosing intentionally to do these miracles on the Sabbath. Just to kind of get up in the grill of the Pharisees a little bit, to get in their faces. He chose to do this on the Sabbath. The guy was probably there begging the day before. He was probably going to be there begging the day after, the next week. All Jesus had to do was walk by, hey dude, the Pharisees were kind of mad at me for that last Sabbath thing, so come back tomorrow, and we're going to take care of this blindness thing, okay? And he could have done that, but he's like, nope, we're doing it today. The Sabbath, which all that means is a day of rest, right? It's the day of rest. And for those of you who weren't here, we talked about that, how there was this, in the Ten Commandments, there's this principle of Sabbath given, which is just a principle of taking a day off once in a while, taking a day of rest to focus on the good things, to focus on God, to take time away from work. This is good. And then these guys got a hold of it, and they're like, well, we have to decide, we have to get a checklist for what rest is, and then we're going to punish people if they don't rest. That's not rest. That's intimidation, right? So they had these 39 things that they weren't supposed to do. Sowing, reaping, winnowing, kindling a fire, all these things you're not supposed to be doing on the Sabbath. And so they're like so hung up on enforcing now these 39 things that were not part of the original principle that, and Jesus intentionally chose to do this on the Sabbath. He chose it, I think, to challenge the petty nature of these traditions. Traditions are good. Every church has traditions. We have a tradition that we come and we meet in a pizza place in the wintertime, and we meet in an amphitheater in the summertime. That's a good tradition. But now if we go in and like, oh, no, we've got this pattern down. We've got this thing right. We need every church now to meet in a pizza parlor on Sunday, and every church to meet outside in the summertime. And traditions are good. Traditionalism, once you cross over and become an ism, sometimes not so good. So Jesus wants to challenge the petty nature of the traditions of these Pharisees. And so he's like intentionally dropping these things right in the middle of the Sabbath. Jesus will not have the handcuffs of tradition put on his nature of grace and his nature of mercy. And these guys are like totally wanting to bind that up and make it fit in their box. He's like, oh, no. This doesn't go in a box. He says, before Abraham was, I am, and I'm going to show you guys rest. Do you think this blind guy is having a minute's rest in his heart and his soul while he's there begging, just trying to get by because he can't see and he hasn't been able to see from birth? And people are walking by thinking, as we talked about, the cultural belief was that when somebody like that was blind from birth, when they had a birth defect, they were guilty of something. Their parents were guilty of something. They were being punished for something. This guy had no rest. And Jesus comes along and is like, all right, well, here's a little mud in your eyes, and you go on down there and wash, and the guy can see, and he's free now. He's got rest for the first time, really, in his whole life. And they're going to raise up and go, what? Oh, no, you broke the Sabbath. And Jesus is not, as we pointed out before, not a Sabbath breaker, but a Sabbath maker. He gave this guy rest. So he won't have the handcuffs of tradition put on his nature of grace and mercy. And so they bring the guy, formerly blind man, or formerly blind friend. He's got no name either. I like that he's just kind of generic. The man who was born blind, the formerly blind man. And so they bring him into the Pharisees, and the Pharisees find out. It's like, oh, man, this Jesus guy again. And their opinion turned when they found out that Jesus had made mud on the Sabbath. And I was trying to figure out what rule that was. And if I brought up that, sometimes the CHP pulls you over just because they want to give you a ticket. If they want to give you a ticket, they're going to find something to give you a ticket for, right? I told you guys a story about how I got pulled over on foot in my Camaro one time. The cops were on the side of the road, and they just whistled at me, and, no front license plate. Come on, guys, I'm trying to go to class. If they want to get you on something, they're going to get you on something. And this was the same thing. These were like, it's like the church CHP. If they want to give you a ticket and find you guilty of something, they're going to find you guilty of something. But I saw one of my commentaries suggested that the way Jesus actually broke the rules of the Sabbath was that he was kneading, that it took kneading to make the mud. I'm like, that's funny. Usually you knead dough to make bread. Never thought of, kneading mud. So I guess that makes sense, But they wanted to get him. If they want to get you, they're going to get you on something. They'll find some technicality. And it says that some of the Pharisees were saying, this man is not from God, for he does not keep the Sabbath. How can a Sabbath breaker be a man from God? He's a sinner. And others are like, well, how can a sinner perform such signs? This guy was blind, and now he's not. He was blind, and now he can see. How did that happen? And so they were divided, it says. And that word divided is the Greek word schismata. We get our word schism from it, where you got one side and the other. As we're entering into another highly charged political season, you know what schismata looks like, right? CNN versus Fox News, Republicans versus Democrats, and you got this whole narrative, and everybody trying to get you to choose a side, to pull to one side or the other, and that's what had happened to the Jews on this. Some of them were like, oh, there might be something to this. Others, it's like, no, he broke one of those 39 rules. He is a sinner. He is worthy of death. We should throw rocks at his head until he dies. And so they were divided on that. And there were two sides. One that, of course, Jesus is a sinner and a fraud, and as such should be rejected. And the other, if they are going to embrace that how could a sinner do such a good thing? They have to now come to terms with the idea that their understanding and application of the principle of Sabbath was flawed. And we know which side was correct. And maybe they did too. Nobody likes to be wrong. Even in the church, nobody likes to be wrong. And the one side said, this man is not from God because he does not keep the Sabbath. Did you hear the absurdity in that? And we pointed out that Jesus gave this guy rest for the first time in his life. Of course, he was keeping the heart, the principle of Sabbath and rest for the guy's soul. It's absurd to think that, that Jesus did not keep the Sabbath here. So they're divided. I'm missing some of my notes, but that's okay. Just make it up as we go. Jesus has a way of dividing sometimes. He comes here to bring us together, but then sometimes he divides, and that's okay. He has a way of making us question the things we think we know. And just when you think you got it all figured out, just the way he is, it's hard to get your mind around that. We want to be all God and country and protecting our families, and that's all good, but at the same time, Jesus says to love your enemies, to pray for your enemies, to pray for those who would willfully hurt you. And you have these different dimensions that are so difficult to get your head and your heart around with this Jesus guy. And Jesus, he's really good at making you, see one side or the other. It's like, wow, he's going to be the dividing line on that. Here comes a little nature analogy. Whenever rain falls up here, it falls into a watershed. And for every watershed, there's a watershed divide. Where the rain, if it falls on this side, it's going to go to this river. Like on this side, it'll go to Stanislaus. On this side, it'll go. So depending on which side of the ridge, which side of the mountain it falls on, is a watershed divide. And Jesus is kind of like a spiritual watershed divide. And so he comes and he drops into this religious community that feels like they have it all together. And is telling them, no, you don't. You're like misinterpreting this. And so now you got guys on this side and guys on this side. They're trying to figure it out. He's really good at making you question what you think you know. And then drawing you into a deeper place of more and more understanding as you go along. So verse 17. Then they turned again to the blind man. What have you to say about him? It was your eyes that were open. Can you kind of feel the tension here? This is uncomfortable. I don't know if you've ever been brought before, stepped into the principal's office at the principal's invitation. If you've ever been brought into before a church leadership. That's happened to me. And sometimes I deserved it. There were times when I deserved it. There were times it was total bunk. But it's intimidating. And this guy, he'd been brought into the principal's office. He was brought before the church leadership and the courts, like I mentioned, all in one. And you just kind of feel the tension as they talk to him here. Turn again to the blind man. What have you to say about it? It was your eyes that were open. The man replied, he is a prophet. And we're seeing here the guy's relationship with Jesus beginning to grow and to move down the road. When they asked him last time, he said, the man Jesus did this. And now he's like seeing him as a prophet. And he's going to end up at the end of the story worshiping Jesus as God, as Savior. But he's moving along. He's moving along this relationship. He now recognizes him as a prophet, which is just somebody who sometimes can foretell the future and sometimes can foretell the truth. And he's saying this guy Jesus, he's a prophet. His feelings about who Jesus was were beginning to shift. And this is important. So verse 18, they still did not believe that he had been blind and had received his sight until they sent for the man's parents. It wasn't the easy thing to do just to paint the guy as a fraud at this point. If they could find out, if they could prove to somebody that he wasn't really blind, that he was just faking it, they could just like get rid of this whole thing, just throw this out, and like, yep, we solved the mystery. The guy was never really blind. He's a fraud. Jesus is a fraud. Get back to resting on the Sabbath, or else we're going to kill you, right? That would be the easy thing to do. So they still not believe that he'd been blind and had received a sight until they sent for the man's parents. It's like, call his parents in. Bring the parents before the Pharisees. Call them to the principal's office. So they did. And they said, is this your son? They asked. Is this the one you say was born blind? How is it that now he can see? We know he is our son, the parents answered, and we know that he was born blind. But he can see now. How he can see now, or who opened his eyes, we don't know. Ask him. He is of age. He will speak for himself. His parents said this because they were afraid of the Jewish leaders, who already had decided that anyone who acknowledged that Jesus was the Messiah would be put out of the synagogue. That is why his parents said, he is of age. Ask him. So they bring the parents in, and they're scared. They're intimidated. It says here that they had already decided that this is not justice. Right? They'd already decided what was going to happen. Anybody who recognized Jesus as Messiah was going to be excommunicated, was going to be thrown out of the church. This is not godly, how this works. Sure, bring it in, debate it, talk about it. You're going to throw people out because Jesus? Okay. So they bring the parents in, and they're a little unnerved at coming before the principal in the principal's office here. Coming before the authority. And to be excommunicated back then as a Jew was really harsh. People, you get thrown out of church now, you can go find another church. You get thrown out of church, you don't even really need a church to get by in your day-to-day life. It was such a focal point in this culture that if you were excommunicated, that was going to be a very lonely existence after that. Your whole support system was gone, and so they're employing acts of intimidation. And that just does not sound like God to me. That reeks of the other guy, right? That reeks of the devil. That reeks of evil to me when they're like using these forces of intimidation to try and get people to agree with them on this, which is going against what is actually true. So they were interrogated, and they were fearful. They were fearful that they would be seen as part of a conspiracy and that they would be excommunicated. Verse 24, the second time they summoned the man. So they're like really not wanting to talk, the parents. Like, please don't throw us out. You know, we've raised this guy, we're old. He's of age. Ask him what happened. Right? So they're kind of putting him back in the hot spot. It's like, just leave us out of it. We don't know. Yeah, he was blind. We know he was blind. He was blind when he was born. Now he can see. I don't know what happened. He's of age. Ask him. A second time, verse 24, they summoned the man who had been blind. Give glory to God by telling the truth, they said. We know this man is a sinner. Objection, Your Honor. Leading the witness. Right? Aren't they doing that? They're like, oh yeah. Do what God wants, glorify God, and see things our way, and tell the story we want you to tell. That's not justice. That's not truth. They're, trying to frame their own argument. They're leading the witness, like I said. Verse 25, the man replies, whether he is a sinner or not, I don't know. One thing I do know, I was blind, but now I see. Then they asked him, what did he do to you? How did he open your eyes? He answered, I have told you already, and you did not listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you want to become his disciples too? Guys get a little snarky with the Jewish leadership, which is not going to go well. Rather than go into the rest of this, I'm just going to kind of stop that here. And again, I apologize. This is like, unless you like Pink Floyd, where you like it kind of dark and depressing, we're going to leave on that Pink Floyd note. Pink Floyd, The Wall. What a great album. I was listening to that recently. Man, that is just a bummer of an album. It is so depressing. But so we're going to leave on that Pink Floyd kind of note here. But it's going to get better. I'm going to encourage you guys with the fact that good things are going to happen. There's going to be a very important thing that happens here next week. So come if you're able. If not, watch on Facebook. We'll try and get that. I usually like to have a nice little tidy thing to tie it up with, a little word of encouragement. And this is kind of a bummer we're going to end on today. But that's okay, because sometimes we're just in a bummer place. And you never know what's coming around the corner. This guy started off with what a blessing to be blind your whole life, and all of a sudden to have this encounter with this Jesus guy, and now you can see. What an awesome thing. And now he's being questioned, he's being interrogated, things have gotten hard, he's being hauled into the church court leadership thing, where they're interrogating and questioning him. And it's tough, but it's going to get better. So just be encouraged that, sometimes things are hard. And you never know what's coming around the corner. God uses the hard things to bring about the better things. And that was, he could have Jesus could have walked into this guy, said, "Hi, I'm Jesus. I'm the Messiah. I'm here to redeem all of mankind. I would like to give your sight back." And he could have done that, and I don't think this guy would have been finding the depth of relationship with Jesus that he is had Jesus walked in and been that explicit about things and made it that easy. Instead, Jesus was a little cryptic. He says things and asks the guy to do things that don't make a whole lot of sense at the moment. But as time goes on, he's moving into this deeper relationship gradually with Jesus, because Jesus is, kind of letting him be a little cryptic and mysterious about the whole interaction. Starts off as this man Jesus is going to end up with him worshiping Jesus. Right now, Jesus is the prophet. He's like, and I don't know what Jesus said. Not all I know is that I can see. And just remember that what God has done in your life is enough when you're telling the story. Right? You don't have to have all the answers. You don't have to have all the correct theology and a doctorate and, from a divinity school or whatever. You don't need that. Just tell people what Jesus has done in your life. And it is just that easy. And that if you're moving along and you see Jesus as a man today, this is a man that did something good in my life, that's okay. He'll take you there. And then he's going to move you down this path. Right? If he could just boom, drop right here and go, "Hi, I'm Jesus. I'm here to save you," and we'd be all kind of freaked out by that. I would be, going to sit down with all you guys and listen to him. But instead, he brings us along through this process, and that's what's happening here. And if you're there, if it's just the man Jesus who did this for me, it's a great starting point. At some point, Jesus is going to become that prophet to you, and as you move along, you can get to know him better to the point where you worship him. So we welcome people here who are just looking. That's fine. You don't have to believe everything like we do. I may not believe everything like you do, but we come together and we're just kind of walking with each other down this path that God has before us, hopefully from a peripheral knowledge, just kind of a surface knowledge, to a deeper knowledge of who Jesus is and what he does for us. And so that's the path this guy is on. It's not as depressing as it sounds right now. It's a hard day for everybody. Hard day for the parents, It's like, we're old, don't throw us out of church. We need the support. Talk to him, he's of age. He'll tell you what happened. We don't know what happened.